background. Right? Cool.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cal Poly Pomona 17th Annual Cybersecurity and Awareness Fair. We would like to thank our sponsors for supporting this event. I would like to give a warm welcome and introduce Ash Sumer, who will be presenting on the topic Microsoft 365 Defender. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you have enjoyed your time at our event thus far. As we go through this presentation, please feel free to post questions in the chat session. All questions will be answered during the Q&A portion at the very end. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. A little background on me and in a brief introduction. My name is Ash Summer. I have been doing Microsoft 365 security and compliance for about 6 years now. I originally come from a healthcare background, and I've deployed at least about 90% of the Microsoft 365 security and compliance suite. So I have vast experience on the healthcare side, vast experience on the consulting side as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and kick things off here. Go ahead and share my screen so you can get everything started. Okay. And if someone can let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yep, we can see your screen.
Yep.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so as you know, I'm from Microsoft, and today we're going to cover our Microsoft 365 Defender XDR suite. Just to kick things off over here with our Gartner report, in terms of our achievements, Microsoft has been named a leader in a number of Gartner's Magic Quadrant reports. We have been named the leader in access management, enterprise archiving, endpoint protection platforms, unified endpoint management as well, and our CASB solution, which is Microsoft Cloud App Security, has also been named a leader. Forrester has also recognized us as a leader as well in 7 of their Forrester Wave reports. And as you can see at the bottom, these are latest reports. Some from year 2021, 2019 to 2020 as well. Our security analytics platform, email security, EDR solution, unified endpoint management, cloud security gateway. They all have been recognized by Forrester, and we have been named a leader. And there are some other achievements that we've done with Cybersecurity Defense magazine as well, where we have also been named one of the best security firms out there. Now, just to dive in a little bit deeper into our Defender security product, Microsoft as a whole actually correlates or picks up signals, or I would say 8 trillion signals per day. Our Microsoft Security Intelligence Graph, which actually is able to aggregate all these signals from different sources. The different sources are not just Azure accounts, but they're also Microsoft accounts, Bing accounts, Windows devices, endpoints, Outlook, and a number of our partners. They also share their data. Researchers also share their data, law enforcement agencies as well. And all these data that's aggregated together, we're able to find out a threat if it originates, let's just say, from outside of the country. Think of, like, let's say a threat got flagged in Germany, and our Microsoft Security Intelligence Graph actually is able to pick up on that threat in Germany. 1 minute later, if that same threat is seen here in United States, in California or in Sacramento, our intelligence security graph is able to quickly flag that particular threat and make sure that the threat is not passed through inside our Microsoft 365 environment or the Azure environment as well. Now, on Microsoft Intelligence Security Graph, the signal correlation that we do is not just within the United States. So it's actually all across around the globe. And all the partners and researchers and law enforcement agencies are not just within the United States, but they're all across the globe as well. Okay. So kind of diving in a little bit deeper into the actual security solutions that we have. Microsoft has its own zero trust access control strategy. And of course, on a high level, we see zero trust access as never trust, but to always verify. And essentially what happens is that there are three pillars that our technology actually looks at. So first being the signal, second being the decision, and third being the enforcement. So in the signal phase, we have two different categories. The first category is where we have the device. So think of a signal on a device could be the operating system has not been fully patched. It could be a firewall that has been disabled or has not been enabled on that device, or an antivirus solution that has not been installed on a device. So device risk essentially could be a risky device trying to connect to your environment. And then of course, if the risky device has some sort of a malware or some sort of a attacker tied to it, they are able to come into your environment and cause harm to your environment. So that's how we look at risky devices. On the risky user side, we look at anomalies in terms of sign-ins. So for example, if a user had signed in from Sacramento, 1 minute later, they are signing in from Canada or from New York, that's obviously impossible to travel. And there's no way a user is able to do that. So in terms of, if you think of their credentials being compromised, the attacker can just as easily sign in from different locations, apart from where the user signs in from every day. And our Azure AD Identity Protection tool actually uses the power of machine learning to learn these signals across the environment, across the enterprise, to understand how the users are signing into your environment. Let's just say if a user is trying to sign in from Sacramento every day, all of a sudden they're signing in from China or Korea or Afghanistan, India, or some other countries that's a high risk country, then that could pose a threat to the organization itself. And then what the Azure AD Identity Protection tool will actually do, they're going to actually flag that user as a risky user. And then further on, that kind of leads into our decision phase, where you get to decide how you want to apply the policies for these risky users and risky devices as they are connecting to your organization. So for example, if you have a risky user that is coming in, you want to make sure that you want to allow them access, because you don't know if it's a real user, a legitimate user, or if it's an adversary. So then on in the decision phase, you can either allow them access, or if you feel like that you want them to force them, you want them to go through a multi-factor authentication process to essentially prove who they are before they can access your corporate resources, you can go ahead and do that as well. Or you can get a little bit more aggressive, where you can simply go in and block their access so that they're not able to come in and access your organization's resources. And of course, if they're legitimate users, then they're going to open up a support ticket with their support staff and then kind of carry on the action from there. Now, in terms of enforcement, we are able to not only enforce these policies that are created across your environment to Microsoft 365 workloads, but we're also able to extend that protection to different SaaS applications you use, such as SAP, such as Box.com, Salesforce, or any CRM tools that you use. You can also extend protection to legacy applications as well on premises with the help of Azure AD Application Proxy. Now, all of this will kind of make sense from my next slide over here. Now, over here, I just want to map out what the entire Zero Trust user access looks like. So as discussed, let me go ahead and turn on the laser pointer. There's two different parts, the user risk part and the device risk part, right? And then both are tied into our security intelligence graph, which actually scans for 8 trillion signals per day. Now, the first initial step will be to identify those risky users as they are coming into your environment. Now, with the help of Microsoft Cloud App Security, Defender for Identity, Azure AD Identity Protection, you can look at the user sign-in behaviors, the risky users, as they are trying to connect to your organization. Second phase is trying to tap into your Windows Hello for Business, Azure multi-factor authentication. If you feel like these two requirements have been met, maybe you don't want to prompt them for multi-factor authentication as they're trying to make their journey to their corporate environment, or you can enforce multi-factor authentication, really up to you. The next phase is in the device risk phase, where you have the power of Intune and Defender for Endpoint, which are both Microsoft products. You have the ability to gain visibility into every single device that connects to your environment, and if that device is compliant or not. So again, you have the ability to determine if the firewall is turned on or if the machine has been patched or not. You also can use our partner MDM solutions as well. If you have AirWatch YAM solution deployed in your environment, you can also gain visibility on the device, determine the compliance of the device, and then tie conditional access policies to that. Now, that covers the signal phase. Next up is the decision phase, where you actually make the decision, as discussed earlier. As these devices, risky devices and risky users are trying to connect to your environment, you can remediate those risky devices or risky signals by forcing them through a multi-factor authentication process. If you want to be a little bit more aggressive, you can force them through a password reset process. We have a built-in feature called Azure AD Self-Service Password Reset that can be enabled in your Azure environment. Now, further on, as we get into enforcement, you're going to notice that we don't only cover the Microsoft 365 applications, but we're able to enforce these policies to any modern applications that are taking advantage of OpenID, SAML. If they live in Azure or AWS, does not matter. You have the ability to tie conditional access policies to those applications as well. If you're using any third-party SaaS applications like G Suite, AWS, Salesforce, Box.com, ServiceNow, you also have the ability to tie those conditional access policies to those as well. Legacy apps actually need to be pre-configured with Azure AD Application Proxy first, which is going to essentially make that call from Azure to your on-premises web servers so that those applications can be available to your users in the Azure cloud. So make sure Azure AD Application Proxy is enabled first. Once you do so, then you can tie in conditional access policies. And of course, to documents and mobile apps as well, you can tie conditional access policies as well. In order to, if you see a device which is coming in from an unmanaged environment, for example, if a person is using a personal device trying to connect to the organization, you can lower their access or restrict their session. So essentially, you can block them from downloading any content from our Azure or Microsoft 365 platform and monitor that session, of course. And make sure those users are not adversaries that are trying to access your Microsoft 365 or Azure cloud. Okay, moving on to a Microsoft XDR stack. I want to kind of talk about the adversary's journey in a typical environment, right? So when an attacker or a hacker actually comes into the environment, the very first thing they do is they send out a phishing email, which is going to have some sort of a malicious attachment in there. So as those emails come in, your end user goes in and double clicks on that email. As they are interacting with that email, in the background, an attachment gets downloaded onto the machine. The attachment actually opens up a backdoor on the system for the attacker to actually come in and take command and control of the system itself. So think of like a malicious script, which is tied to an email. You go in, double click on that particular email to read it. You don't see a script being executed in the background, which is going to download a file, which is going to open up a backdoor to your system. So once that happens, the hacker or the attacker is able to try to run some commands on your system. They can use tools like Mimikatz or backtrack hacking tools to actually look into the memory and try to figure out the hashes, the password hashes that are tied to your user account. Once they are able to compromise your user account, then they move laterally into the environment. They're jumping from one machine to another, trying to find a highly privileged account. So a highly privileged account could be a global admin account or a domain administrator account. And they're able to do so by jumping on every single machine and trying to use that tool, Mimikatz or Backtrack, to pull down the memory hashes to see if any other person has signed into that system. And of course, once they're able to find a highly privileged account, then they can compromise your domain controller, the central authority. Now, once they are able to compromise the domain controller, there's two things they can do. They can tap into your share drives, your S drives, your U drives, and exfiltrate data. So upload it to their personal box.com or Dropbox. Or they can go ahead and run a ransomware script against those S and U drives, encrypt those files, and demand ransom. Okay. So how does Microsoft actually protect you through this journey? So essentially, we come in with our Defender for Office 365 platform, which provides you with malware detection. It provides you with safe links and safe attachment capabilities, gives you the overall email security solution to make sure no malicious emails are able to come into your environment and no malicious documents are able to come into your environment. Next up, we have Endpoint Defender, Defender for Endpoint, which actually gives you endpoint detection and response capabilities. So essentially, if an attacker is able to pass this phase, once they download the malicious scripts or files onto the endpoint itself, then our EDR tool is able to detect that and wipe that out from the system. It has other additional capabilities such as automatic surface reduction, where it's able to find any open doors that exist on the system itself and actually give you a remediation guide where you can go in and close any of the open doors on the system itself. Okay. Further on, with Azure AD Identity Protection, this actually is not part of the Defender XDR suite, but can be used alongside it. So think of, with my example, a user trying to sign in from Sacramento. 1 minute later, they're signing in from another country or from another region of the United States. You have the ability to, with the power of Azure AD Identity Protection, you have the ability to determine these risky users. And once you do so, then you can force them through a multi-factor authentication process. And of course, once they verify who they are, then they can go on and access the organization's resources. Defender for Identity is another powerful tool. As those attackers are moving laterally in your environment, what they do is they use a method called pass the hash attack or overpass the hash attack. As they are using those methods, Defender for Identity is actually able to find the signals across your environment. Now, how it does that is essentially there's a sensor that gets installed on the domain controller. And MDI, Microsoft Defender for Identity, looks at every single packet that comes in and out of the domain controller. And of course, if there's any anomalous activities going on in the environment, Defender for Identity can actually flag that and send it back to the Defender portal. Okay. Next up is Microsoft Cloud App Security. So as the hacker is able to tap into your S and U drives and they're exfiltrating data, they're moving data outside of the organization, you want to get visibility on that. And you can do that using MCAS, Microsoft Cloud App Security. With the power of shadow IT, getting visibility on the apps that your organizational users should not be using. You can gain visibility of all the apps that are being used across your environment, first off. But if you have a combination of Microsoft Intune and Defender for Endpoint, you can actually gain visibility on every single actor, every single person who's actually trying to access any web app out there. And Microsoft Cloud App Security has integration with over 16,000 apps. So which gives it the ability to determine any, or I would say almost 90% of the apps that are being used out there in the internet, on the internet. Further on, you also have the ability to create policies to find out if somebody is trying to exfiltrate data. So what we call unusual file deletion, unusual file movement that's happening across your environment. You can create those policies, enable that, and apply it across your organization. So whenever those policies get triggered, an alert gets generated and sent out to you, and then you can go on and take remediation action. Okay. And then Azure Information Protection is a very useful tool. So think of the attacker actually coming in. Now, their main goal or objective is to look at highly sensitive data that exists in the environment. And once they are able to find that highly sensitive data, then of course, they're going to go on and try to encrypt that data. With Azure Information Protection, you can classify and protect your sensitive data across your Microsoft 365 workloads, even on premises as well. So in that way, only authorized individuals are able to look at the sensitive data and nobody outside of that. So obviously, when the attacker comes in, they're able to look inside that sensitive data. They won't be able to see the contents of it. And then, of course, they won't be able to use the ransomware tool or try to exfiltrate the data and post it to a dark net website. Okay, and the last two features are privilege identity management and access reviews. Privilege identity management essentially gives you the ability to elevate every domain admins or any person who has a privileged account, make sure that they go through a elevation process because before they can go on and carry out administrative duties in the Microsoft 365 environment or Azure environment. So it gives you a time-bound access. So think of just enough access. Like today, you may have an environment where your global administrators or your domain administrators have unlimited access and indefinite access, right? So they're free to go in and do whatever they want in your Microsoft 365 environment in Azure, and they can do it whenever they want. With privilege identity management, it's time bound. So you can not only restrict their access to whatever they need, just give them enough access, but you can also control the time that they can have that access. So either 5 hours, 6 hours, or during the workday only. Every time they come back in to try to execute any administrative duty, they have to go through a multi-factor authentication process to prove who they are. And of course, if an adversary is trying to come in and elevate themselves, they won't be able to complete the MFA process. That's why privileged identity management is very secure. With access reviews is also very important. Think of you hiring a temporary IT administrator who's going to come in for a short-term project, and after the project, they leave. Sometimes some of the security admins or our environments they have all these old stale accounts that exist. And then as a security administrator, you're not able to gain visibility across all these accounts and to what access they have in your environment. With access reviews, you now have the ability to do that and actually determine if that specific person does still need that access. You can revoke their access, you can delete their access. You have full control of all the accesses for all the domain admins. Okay, that being said, looks like we are at 10:55, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop here. And if there's any questions for me, please feel free to go ahead and ask. I'm gonna tap into the chat window here to see if there's any questions there.
I have a question actually.
Sure.
So over the past few years, like what sort of trends do you see in EDR platforms?
Over the past few years, I've seen in terms of endpoint detection and response, what, like for us specifically, what really sets us apart is our correlation. So think of like how I walk through the Defender XDR suite, the attacker coming in through email, then jumping into the endpoint, then walking all across the organization's devices and being able to exfiltrate data. I feel like our platform is able to correlate those threats and bring that up in a single chain compared to other technologies that are out there that only are siloed to just the Defender just the endpoint protection only. So you don't get the visibility of the email side, you don't get the visibility of the lateral movement and the cloud. So that's, and of course the EDR is pretty much standard across different platforms because it has one purpose, right? For the tool to go in and find out if there's any threats on the system itself and wipe it out, right? Endpoint detection and take response actions. So, but really what sets our tool apart is our correlation capability and our ability to recognize threats with our Microsoft Security Intelligence Graph. We scan over 8 trillion signals per day. So we're able to recognize threats much faster than other platforms. Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, guys, for the time and the opportunity. On behalf of Microsoft, I do want to thank everybody who joined the call. And of course, if there's any questions, please feel free to drop that in the chat. And whenever I get time, I'll go ahead and respond back to you guys and appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ashumar, for being our guest speaker today. Your presentation was very insightful. I also want to thank everyone for attending Microsoft 365 Defender today. We hope you learned a lot from this session and we appreciate your engagement. If you have any other questions, please reach out to us and we will be happy to help you find the answer. Please do not forget to check out our water bottle and laptop sticker contest as we are giving away No Stretch Press $20 ebook voucher. Thank you again and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye.